Hello and welcome to another episode of Smokey and the One-Armed Bandit. In today's episode, I'm pretty fired up. I've got Christmas holidays at the moment and a whole list of little jobs to get done on Smokey. I don't think it's going to be too long. I'm going to be able to fire the engine up. So today's episode is going to be all about getting the mechanical side of things done so that we can get oil pressure and bring it to life. So this is the first job we're going to smash through in today's episode. This is a rollover vent for the fuel tank. Basically, if it sits like that, it lets the tank breathe. But if you were to say, I don't know, flip the car, then there's a little ball in there that's going to stop the fuel from pouring all over you as you try to escape. And that's going to be a pretty good thing to have. So we're going to install that, but first we need a bracket. And here is said bracket. And here it all is installed in the car. Well, the next thing on our list was the battery tray. Normally on an E46, you'd be mounting your battery here behind the tail light. But that's not very good for weight distribution being on the driver's side. And also if you ever take a hit in here, I don't know if we'd be able to get the battery out. So we ended up changing up positions. We also changed up battery, went with a dry cell Optima battery so that we don't have to build a cover and vent, save ourselves a bit of time. Once we knew the battery, I ended up ordering this bad boy online from Optima Trays in America. It's a CNC cut battery tray specific for the battery that we're ordering. Uses these clamps here to actually hold it down. It's a nice bit of kit. It doesn't use those janky all threads with the clamp over the top to hold it down. And I think it looks pretty cool and very race car. So if we jump under the car here, you'll also see we've got some aluminium there just to make sure it can't pull through the floor. Other than that, pretty easy install. Drill a couple of holes, put some bolts in, and away we go. So that's a battery tray done and dusted. Well, the next thing we've been working on with the car has been the catch can. We probably went a little above and beyond on this one, but you'll probably see why that is in a couple of minutes when we fit it into the car. For the same reason, it's a bit of an odd shape, but that's all for space requirements to get it into where we want it to be. It's pretty big. It's about 4.5 litres. It's got a baffle inside it there. You probably can't see it. And it's got these two holes for the breathers, these two from the top of the engine. And it should work pretty well as a catch can. I do know the LS is like a pretty decent sized catch can and breather setup, so we wanted to make sure that we didn't skimp in that area. We've also got a drain plug just down there. Because of where we're placing this in the car, we can't put the drain plug right at the bottom, but I think it'll be low enough that we can drain out plenty of fluid if it does happen to fill up. So that's the catch can. Now I'll install it in the car, show you why this is a bit special and a bit of a weird shape. Well, the catch can's all mounted in there now. It's in the back. It's sort of in a void between the firewall and the cabin. I think that's where the heater core used to go. If you look closely, you can see that there's two filters on it that are pretty decent size, so I shouldn't have any problems breathing to atmosphere. Coming from the engine, I've got two AN12 lines. They actually kind of use this oil filler setup. It's an oil filler cap, and then it's got a thread in it for a AN fitting. So I've got one of them on either side. Obviously I'm running two driver's side valve covers to make that happen, but I think that's a pretty good setup. It's nice and cheap. I didn't have to weld anything, so all of my valve covers will still seal, and this engine's going to have no problems breathing. Well, now that we're starting to get towards the end of the build, there's lots of things that need brackets to hold them in place. This is one such bracket. This is to hold the fuse box and the body control module. The electrical side of these I will talk to you guys in a future episode about, but for the moment this is the bracket to hold it all in place, and this is going to sit basically where the glove box is, maybe a tad higher. The thing about this is I wanted to actually mount the fuse box in the middle of the car, basically where the AC and the radio would normally be, but none of the wiring was going to be that long. I would have had to extend it. It's going to be a pain in the butt. So instead we mounted it back where the factory fuse box was, but obviously with an aftermarket setup. So I'll chuck this in the car and show you guys how it all fits up. So here's the fuse box fitted in the car. Should be pretty easy to get to. Should be able to diagnose the car by just leaning in like this and sticking in a multimeter. So pretty happy with that. Should do a good job of holding it in place. Well, it's taken us long enough, but we're finally doing all the lines for the fuel so that we can get this thing to have some fuel pressure. Well, we got the fuel lines done from the surge tank to the regulator. That's the regulator up there. These run down along this chassis rail and into the surge tank box in there. So we still need to do the lines from the tank to the surge tank, but these ones from the surge tank forward are all done.
Yeah, it's about to start the engine now. You ready to go?
Yep. All right, let's see if this fuel system leaks.
We're on.
Oh, here gargling. That's got to be a good sign, right? See no leaks. That's sounding like it should. Oh, well, that didn't take long.
No, they're not. The union's not tight. You've got 11/16.
Well, that explains that one. There's always going to be one.
Yeah, that's not tight either. I can't believe you didn't check with me on that one. Why did you check me on the ones that I'd done and not on the ones I hadn't done? That is just typical of kids.
Good lord. All right, we got one bar.
Double wire them, so you got both running.
Yep.
So you got any wire to do that?
No.
Across the shed, job done.
Nothing like a bit of jerry rigging. You seem stoked about it.
Drift spec. It must be a drift car.
Oh, stop. Well, we just got to 4 bar, so I'm not sure when this is going to keep going. Go for a bit longer, we'll see if it goes any higher. 4 bars, what these things run at. All right, well, that's all right, but we might need to just change the pressure. Okay. Seems to be, I don't see any leaks. Well, it's been a long few days. Dad was here helping me out, so I didn't really get too much filming done. He's a bit of a whirlwind, so we achieve a lot, but I always forget to film. We've cranked her over now, and we do have oil pressure, which is nice. It was a bit of a journey though. Originally, we cranked it over for a long time, and we weren't getting any oil pressure coming through. We didn't know if it was maybe there was an issue or if it just didn't have enough RPM to actually suck the oil up into the system. What we did find though is that night I went on good old YouTube, had a look, and one of the aftermarket oil pump companies put a video up of other people having issues and told us how to do it. Basically, in behind the alternator there, which is a bit hard to see now, there is a plug, and you can take that out. And then what we basically did was just put a bit of fuel hose in there and a funnel and poured oil directly into the oil pump. So that worked well. We've got oil pressure now. The link didn't like the crappy battery that I had in it, so that kept shutting itself off after cranking for a bit. But eventually we got oil up to the top here, so that is all good. Oil coming through the rockers is a good sign. So I'm quite happy with that. It's quite a lot has got done, but it's a bit hard to see or show too much of it at the moment. But yeah, really good couple of days, and won't be too long until I fire this thing up. Well, another day, another lot of parts. Got myself a belt here that I'm going to chuck on the front of the engine. Measured it out the other day, and I think this will hopefully be the right size, but I guess we'll find out in a moment when I chuck it on. Well, that was a bust. Didn't quite fit. It was ever so slightly just too short, so looks like I'm doing another trip down to Repco to get a bigger belt. Well, I'm back from my 3 millionth trip to Repco. I've got 2 belts this time, so I'll see which one of these is going to fit, because I do not want to have to go back down there again. Well, that's the belt on there now. It's one of those things where it should have been nice and easy, but just because I've got a little bit of a modified pulley set up here, took a little bit longer to get the right belt size. So turns out if you're running this Tough Mounts power steering delete pulley, you probably want to get a 6PK 1995, or you might be able to get away with a 1990. There's probably enough left in it to lose 5 mil and still be okay. Down here, I think the tension's right, so that's looking, I don't know, looks pretty good to me. So yeah, another thing off the list. One of the things I've always been very conscious of in the drift car, considering I've got one hand, has been the switches and their positions. With the 180, I partially got away with it because I had stock CA seats. They gave me a bit of extra movement. But now that I've got this nice big Velo, I don't think I'm going to be able to move around too much to get to switch panels. So what that means is I need to bring the switches to me. We've made a start on that over here. You can see that these are the power window switches. These are actually reasonably important because we end up putting the window down and talking to the people at the start line quite a bit. And sitting in the start line with the windows down is a lot nicer, particularly on hot days. So we've mounted that there. I can actually get to that really easy. I can even use my little hand to raise and lower it. The whole thing's still loosely bolted in at the moment, but that's looking really good. Dad's made that up. I'll show you guys from the other side, just so you get a bit of a better idea. It's obviously sitting on top of the handbrake. So we've built that, yeah, directly on top of the handbrake. Now this will be a push handbrake, not a pull. So don't worry about you guys thinking the handbrake might actually hit on the bracket. It's gonna go forward, not backwards. And yeah, I think it's a nice little neat solution. It's gonna mean that I can put the windows up and down whenever I want, and I'm not gonna have to mess around or worry when I head off for a battle that my windows aren't up. Well, it's probably not a big deal, but I really hate having drift cars that have multicolored panels. So I've gone out and got Born Again Restorations to paint this front bar. Gonna chuck that on the car. Putting it all together, it's gonna give me that bit more motivation, I think, to smash out those last few jobs to get it running. Well, here it is on the car. Looks pretty good, pretty happy with the color match. That front guard there's pretty dusty and really needs a buff, but yeah, looks good, feeling rejuvenated now. Time to smash through some actual jobs. Well, we got ourselves a radiator. We got this M3 Mishimoto unit. So that all bolts in, obviously being an M3 radiator, it's designed to go in here. We also have the stock shroud back here. It fits, but only just. We had to cut a couple of ribs out of the fan back here to get it to fit, but that should flow plenty of air, I reckon. This diverter plate down here is because normally an oil cooler on the M3 goes down the bottom, which I didn't know about. I did look at getting an aftermarket oil cooler to put down there, but it's like 1,200 bucks. So about $1,000 more than a normal type oil cooler, so I think I'll skip that one. So we just got this diverter plate because the actual fan pulls from down the very bottom here. So I didn't want the fan to be pulling around the radiator. I want it to go through it. So that's the diverter plate to stop that. Otherwise, fits in quite well, just needed a bit of fettling. So it should be a pretty good unit. It should keep the LS nice and cool. Well, that's the end of another weekend. I didn't do heaps of filming this weekend because it was just lots of little fiddly jobs to get done, and also a whole heap of electrical, which isn't in this episode. So car's heading off to get an exhaust tomorrow. It's going to head to a local exhaust place that's done the E30 and a couple of others. We're going to put a muffler in there. How much it quietens it down, I don't want it to quieten it down too much, but just enough that my ears don't bleed, I think is about the right amount. So that goes off tomorrow. It'll come back before the next weekend, and then I'm probably going to have about another week of working on it, and then off to the tune of the week after. So busy times ahead. Well, I got Smokey back from its little holiday down the hill getting an exhaust. Before everyone gets their hot boy hard on, I'm going to tell you that stainless systems with big cannons and purple tips ain't really my style, so that's not what we've gone with. Sort of subtle but purposeful is more the way that I've built this car and more my style, so that's what we've gone with the exhaust. So as you can see, or barely see, that's the exhaust just at the end there. It's got a bit of a turn down on it, gives it more room for the muffler to not hit anything. And yeah, I think it looks pretty good for what it needs to. It's hidden out the way and you don't really see it, so that's my style. I'll chuck the car in the air and show you guys what the rest of it looks like. So what I told the exhaust guy I wanted is I wanted it to be nice and tucked underneath the car so it's not too low. I want it to be nice and robust because this thing's probably still going to get 50-50 grinded on curbs and ripple strips. And I wanted it easily removable. Didn't need to be pretty, didn't need to be you know, stainless steel or anything like that, because I know the hard life that this is probably going to live, getting hit and that sort of thing. So I think he's done a pretty good job, pretty happy with it. It should do everything that I need to and not restrict any power. You can see it comes from the headers that we had here, along to an X pipe behind the gearbox, then 2.5 inch on both of those pipes to this muffler back here. So I think that works pretty good. It should quieten it down enough that it doesn't make my ears bleed, but still be plenty loud for a track car. We also have the turn downs that I spoke about before. You can see from here how much that allows you to tuck the muffler up, which suits me. I think overall I got exactly what I wanted. Nice and robust, easy to remove, and mounted well as high pretty much as you can go on the car, so it won't get hit too often. Well, it's a bit hot and sweaty in the shed today, but that's all right. We're making some progress. We've got all the radiator lines done. We've got this inline filler that Dad's filling up at the moment. So that's all looking pretty good. It's a tight fit for the fan, but it does actually sit in there without hitting the shroud. So that's all pretty good. It'll be good to get some water in this thing. And then we've got a pressure tester just to make sure that there's no leaks. Well, I think the last thing on this episode to show you guys is going to be the intake for the car. Dad's whipped up a bracket and an intake pipe, so we'll go take a look at what he's done. So here's the intake pipe we've been working on. We've got this 90-degree silicone joiner up here, a 45 bend in aluminium, and then a filter down the bottom. This is actually just a temporary solution. What we really want to do is get some kind of over the radiator setup working so we can get fresh air from the front, because it gets pretty hot in the engine bay, but don't really have time to design that at the moment. I kind of just want to get the car running, so we've just done this simple sort of setup. A lot of people do run this setup and don't seem to have too much of an issue, so it might still be okay for us, but I told Dad just do something temporary so that we can get the engine running and on the dyno for the minute. He doesn't really do temporary though. If you look in there, that's a big old bracket that is mounted to the heads to keep this from moving around. We've also got the bung there for the air temp sensor so that we can monitor those air temps, make sure they're not getting too ridiculous. But it's looking pretty good. We'll see what the IETs are when this engine starts running and when it gets out on track. And we'll decide what we do with this setup once we take a look at that. So for the minute, it's sure as hell not going anywhere. Looks pretty neat, and it may just get a little bit too much hot air. But we'll figure that one out once the car fires up. Well, I think that does it for this episode. We've got a hell of a lot done. We've got radiator in and radiator all plumbed and got water in it. We've got the intake pipe, the exhaust, we've got oil pressure, and we've got a lot of other little bits and pieces done. So it's been a big month or so working on all that. I think mechanically the engine's actually probably ready to fire up. The wiring is sort of what's letting it down, which I'll cover in the next episode. But yeah, real happy overall. So I'll see you guys in the next episode of Smokey and the One-Armed Bandit.